Welcome back, everybody, to the SmallTown Collectibles YouTube channel. I'm Jimmy Don Kerr. My guest today, I say this when I seek out people to have on 10 questions. There's usually a few things I'm looking for. Sometimes, an established channel that we all know, a channel that is growing really fast. Maybe it's a channel, somebody I just want to get to know a little better. This particular channel kind of hits a couple of things for me. Somebody I definitely wanted to get to know a little better, and somebody that I think that's up and coming, is on the rise as far as the channel is concerned. There's a lot of great content. You'll see right now, you'll see this guy everywhere. You'll see him over on Mark's channel at Legion of Comics. You'll see him with Rob, Fat Stacks on Slab Hub. His channel is really good. You've got new comic book day hauls. You've got Mystery Box Mondays. You've got two cool guys, two hot picks, which is actually one of my favorite segments on YouTube that I watch on a regular basis. So everybody join me in welcoming to 10 Questions, Chris, the Comic Vet.
Thanks for having me, Jimmy. It's quite the honor. Let me tell you. I joked with Mark a few weeks ago. I said, you know that you've made it on YouTube in the comic community when Jimmy reaches out to you and you get to go on 10 questions. And I said, I've been quietly poking him in the side for the better part of, 5 or 6 months. Like, when you're ready, I'm ready too, Jimmy. So thank you very much, my man, for having me on here. It's
long
quite
overdue.
the pleasure.
Long overdue. No. You've been a big supporter of mine, really, from the jump. I know I've shouted you out a few times. You've shouted me out, and we've just kind of been, kind of gotten to be friends and developed a relationship through YouTube. And you're just one of those people I really wanted to have on to really get to know better. Plus, I think your channel is an up-and-coming channel. I think people need to find you because you show a lot of comic book knowledge. Like, Mark is one of the most knowledgeable people I see on YouTube.
Yeah.
But you're right there with him. Like, you can go toe-to-toe with that cat on his channel as far as comic book knowledge. And so I thought it was important to bring you on and kind of give people an opportunity to learn a little more about you. And like I said, just really selfishly for myself, just to get to know you a little better. and your dude is cool when he shows up to your show with a Metallica shirt on.
I had to do my homework too, Jimmy.
That's right. Metallica rules. We all know this. Slotted Up 503 and I are spirit brothers because he texted me yesterday and said, yeah, Super Jesse just went off to the store to do something. I'm here with the kids at the daycare, and we're all jamming out to Shortest Straw. And I was like, my man.
Nothing wrong with playing Justice. Yeah, that's a good album.
Yeah. So, Chris, first question always on 10 Questions is the one, what or who got you into collecting?
Reading comic books, my dad. There's just no getting around that part. My dad, I'm a second generation comic book reader, and my dad was very much in the mid 50s to late 50s. He discovered comic books, and then in the late 70s, early 80s, when I started to learn how to read and developed a love for superheroes, the Christopher Reeve Superman was my introduction to pulp culture when it came that way. And it wasn't something that he shied me away from. I would get those type of comic books. I'll be honest, it was way above my wheelhouse at the time, being 6 or 7. But he I guess at the time saw that much like himself, there needs to be an introductory to comic books. And so he would get me the Archie books, or the Richie Rich, Casper's Friendly Ghost, these type of children's comic books. And then, that's when you learn to read comic books properly, going page to page, panel to panel that way. And then it was, shortly after, a couple of years later, after watching more and more Saturday morning cartoons or the 60s cartoon repeats, like obviously the Spider-Man, Captain America, the old FF, that kind of stuff. And even the old Superman serials with George Reeve. I would get into that, and then I just one day decided enough was enough with these children types. Give me something a little bit more mature. And like I said, I've often said, not that superhero books are mature, it's just you graduate into the next level of reading when it comes to comic books. And then after that, you get into the more technically mature stuff, the Frank Miller, the Alan Moore, these type of books. But the collector side of it all, Jimmy, that's my mom. My father was the reader of that. My mom had the wherewithal to know that things in your life when you're a child may turn out to be something a little bit more special later on in adulthood. So my mom was, someone who would take care of things for me as a kid. If she saw that I wasn't necessarily using something or playing with something anymore, it wouldn't get tossed out. It would get put away unless I was being, a bad kid. Then it would get tossed out.
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah.
So, do you consider yourself? Question two is like, do you consider yourself a reader who collects, or just a flat out collector?
Well, a reader who collects, but it does have come with that small caveat that I do like to collect stuff as well. I'll be honest. Uh, if there's particularly, say, an Amazing Spider-Man book that's being released, and there's a couple nice covers or a couple different variants, I'll grab those variants just because I'm a collector. But I am going to get that, cover A, and I'm going to read it, even though even though I might be struggling with that particular story arc or something. I am a reader first. If you're not a reader first, you're in it for the wrong reasons, my man. Right? Like you might as well just go play the stock market. Stop taking something away from a community that thoroughly enjoys reading. Like, just go play the stock market. Deal with
So,
Bitcoin.
do you think that, because I think there are different ways to collect, right? Like, I am a reader
Hmm.
who amassed a massive collection.
Yeah, you and me both.
I'm also a collector in that I will seek out books, like you said, variants and different things. Like, I'll seek out because I like to collect.
Yep.
I will also buy books for their art.
Hmm.
Like a lot of older books, like you're really, when you get into your golden age, the really old books, like as far as they read, they are not great. But the art themselves, like Captain America was propaganda, right? For the war. I mean, that's essentially what it was.
Yep.
But the art is unbelievable. Like, it's
Hmm.
just, for that time frame. And you think about now, all the technology, all the different things that we have, and the way they can create art. To think that they were doing those things back then, and it's so beautiful. Like, it blows my mind. So, like, I think there's different ways to collect, and there's some people. I'm like you. If you're a true specker, where like I spec too, from the standpoint of it's how I keep the money flowing to pay for my hobby.
Hmm.
I don't use mine and Amy's money that we make in our day jobs to fund my hobby. I've always done it by buying stuff, reselling it, making money, or just, whatever, get my money back for what I did. Is that similar? Do you do a similar thing?
So I'm not at the point where I'm selling books, but I do buy expensive books. I do buy, if there's a deal that's put in front of me, I do buy a spec book. Now, but what I meant originally was for those that just came into this just to go buy themselves a Hulk 181, sit on it, and then turn around and flip it, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. If
Sure.
you're not out once or twice a month on New Comic Book Day picking up books to read them, that's the genesis of my thought process. Like, your foundation of comic books should still be reading. Uh, those that go out and want to buy slab books or whatever, God bless you. I do it too. I see nothing wrong with it. But if I have the opportunity to buy a slabbed book like a Grail, Amazing Spider-Man #1, I am going to try and find a reader copy, or at least go online digitally and try and read it that way. Even though I do happen to have a copy of it slabbed, I would love still to know what's inside that slab. But yeah, we're all collectors at heart when it comes to comic books. Like the nostalgia factor of it does come into it when it comes to collecting. And for those that are our age, it's hard to let go of some of those books for the nostalgia factor. So that's the part that keeps the collector in you. But like I said, the foundation for comic books has to be reading. Or personally, I think you're in it for the wrong reasons.
So, you said your dad started collecting like the 50s and 60s, right?
Yep,
Did that, has any of that been passed on to you?
I'm glad you asked. So my dad passed away in 2009, and before he passed away, uh, I realized that in a few of my long boxes from the early or from the mid 80s, he snuck a couple of his books in there. And I realized, or I found out, pardon me, after he passed away, that I found one of his books. So I was so blown away by the fact that I got one of his books, and he always made it seem like his books are long gone, like they're all I have is just the memories. And he would often, when comic books would come up, he would talk about the ones that he would love to read. And I found the first one, and I went out and I got it I got it slightly not restored, but clean and slightly pressed. It was in horrible shape, Jimmy. But it's Turok, Son of Stone, issue number 12 from 1958. So I got it slabbed just because it was my dad's. Not that I'm ever going to move on from it, but it's just something that I wanted to have and have it taken care of properly so that it would never be destroyed or wrecked or anything. But to talk about what you mentioned earlier about artwork, like this is a painted cover from 1958. Like even if you're not
Look
a
at
fan
that.
of the if you're not a fan of this type of genre of comic book, you can still appreciate how beautiful like this cover is. And it's interesting, like my father would talk about, he grew up in a small fishing village on the east coast of Canada on an island called Newfoundland. And so they would get their supplies, basically seasonally. And it would be 2 or 3 times a year that comic books would come in on these giant steamships. And so his new comic book day was essentially 3 times a year. And
That's awesome.
to finally realize what he was talking about, how that was, is that this book is actually released seasonally as well. So, it wasn't nothing for him to get Turok 11, then 12, then 13, and not miss one, even though it was over a span of a year. It was a little while after that book actually got returned to me from CGC that I opened another one of my long boxes from the late 80s and early 90s, and I found a stack of American westerns. And in amongst those were Hopalong Cassidy, Kid Cole Outlaw, Cisco Kid, Texas Rangers in Action, uh, Fighting Davy Crockett. And I took the time and I went through them all. I read them all, and I read the ads too. And I remember one point, my dad telling the story that he thought at like 8 or 9 years old, in I guess that would be 56, 57, somewhere around that time frame, he used to say, him and his friends would joke that these American kids, they're the greatest kids in the world. They're all walking around with these X-ray vision glasses on, looking at everyone in skeleton form. So they got caught up with the ads and that. And I remember thinking at the time, that's funny because in the early 80s when I was reading these comic books, I thought all the American kids had all sea monkeys in their bedrooms and stuff.
I love it.
So yeah, that's I did get a small handful of his collection that somehow he managed to keep, for the better part of 60 years on to 70 years now.
It's one of the
And
best things about it's almost like he gave you the treasure hunt again,
yeah,
except that treasure was some of his books because that's
yeah,
one of the funnest parts about it, right? Is out kind of digging through boxes and doing all that and finding that treasure, and you found it and just so happened to be your old man's, and that I think that's pretty cool.
yeah, and it was quite the moment, like to going through like an Uncanny X-Men part of my long box, and all of a sudden, what's this Hopalong Cassidy? I've never purchased Hopalong Cassidy, and then you have that moment, like, oh my God,
Oh,
he snuck these books in here, and he's been gone for all this time, and I had no idea it was here, and yeah, so it's pretty
that's
cool.
awesome. My uncle was a big Western
Yeah,
guy too, and I think that was
yeah,
from that generation. I tell that story a lot where we went. He bought this old school desk, and the reason he ended up going back and buying it was because there were a bunch of Western comic books in it, and that's because that was his favorite genre. So,
yeah.
question three, Chris, was, and I was interested to know: is it any different as far as like comic book shops in Canada than it would be in the US? Like, is it any different, or is it just kind of normal, like it would be for me to go to my local LCS?
It's just a little bit more expensive.
Is that right? I
Yeah,
guess
I
the
bet.
exchange rate, or
It's for the exchange rate. Yeah, where your cover price would be 4.99, we would pay 5.75, or or $6. Uh, Everything is exactly the same. I've been to many comic shops across the United States, Las Vegas, Florida, New York, Michigan, Ohio. It's all the same. Even the weird shopkeepers, they're the same. To be honest, it's a beautiful thing.
It's a
Other
universal
than
language, man.
other than a slightly different accent, and depending where you are across North America, it's all the same thing. It's still, Grail's the Grail, the back wall is the back wall, and the dollar bin's the dollar bin.
There you go, man. That's awesome. Well, I always kind of wondered that. Like I've
Hmm.
been to Canada, right? But
Yep.
literally just across the border.
Okay.
Like be in Michigan and go, or to, like Detroit, and you can go across and gamble, over there in
Yep.
Canada,
Yep.
that kind of thing. I've
Yep.
never actually experienced Canada for what Canada truly is. And the beautiful country that it is. And so that's something someday that I want to do is like get to Toronto or some places like that and just kind of
Yep.
check them out. So, but
Hmm.
I always wondered that if it was any different, like, is it different in Canada or Mexico or Japan or China? Like, is it just a comic book shop? Is it that truly that universal language?
Truly. Even the cons, they're the same too.
That's
I'll be
awesome.
honest. Most of the population of vendors that come across the border to Toronto or some of the other larger cons that's here are American. I would say 75% of the dealers that come up are American, and they even give like the American discount if you use the greenback as opposed to our monopoly colored money.
I love it. Oh, all right. So, question three, or sorry, question four. You were in the military, right? Obviously, the comic vet.
Yep.
And I was kind of wanting to know, like, when you were in the military, did you continue to read comics, or was that something you were like, okay, like I know when I went to college, right? When I went to college, that was the time in my life where I really stepped away from the hobby. I really had discovered girls and beer, and and
Yep.
so comic books kind of went to the back. And then I got older and disposable income. Kind of point in my life where I had disposable income and things like that. And I got back into the hobby because I loved it when I was a kid. Um, how is the military? Like, I was interested with the military. Is it similar to like the college experience where you kind of go away, or if you're stationed somewhere, do the guys get bored? You're looking for something to read. Is that comic books? That's what I was kind of wanting to know.
There's always boredom whenever you there's always boredom whenever you're in downtime with the military. I can remember in my basic training, we went to a part of Ontario called Base Borden. It's a board. Borden is a base that's probably, let me do the exchange from metric to imperial. Probably about 150 miles northwest of Toronto, and when you're on basic training, you're basically working from 12 to 15 hours a day, and then you sleep for 6 or whatever. But you do need that little bit of wind down time. And I can remember, I think it was probably 1992 when I first joined. I brought a trade paperback of Frank Miller's and Chris Claremont's Wolverine, the limited series. But I brought the collected version, and I can remember breaking it out and reading it, before the lights went off, but we were still like we were all getting ready to go to bed, and I was flipping through it, admiring Frank Miller's work, and picking up on the one-liners that Wolverine was dropping at that time in that particular landmark limited series. And I was getting poked fun from a couple guys. And then a couple nights later, one of those guys that was teasing me said, "Hey man, you mind if I take a look at that Wolverine book you got there?" And quickly it made its rounds through the entire the course, everyone that was on hand. So I was a little perturbed at the time because I remember picking up the trade paperback and it was mint, and I actually brought it in a bag and board. By the time it was done, it looked like it was probably a book from the 50s. Like, but it was just one of those things that was a shared experience, and it actually brought me closer together with other guys who were going through the same thing that I was going through, that just didn't have the wherewithal to bring something with them, to make them feel more like themselves, something to remind them from home. So yeah, there was to say there was comic books when I was there, yes, but I was probably the purveyor of the comic books, and but it was something that was thoroughly enjoyed, and it was something like I mentioned, that helped cause the downtime, the wind down from the stresses of what basic training actually was. And then afterwards, I quickly got known as, that guy with that Wolverine comic book. So when basic training was over, and then I started doing other courses to get further along in my military career at the time, I would bring other trade paperbacks. I remember bringing The Killing Joke, and that eventually made its rounds around as well, because we all know The Killing Joke is arguably one of the best stories that was ever told in a one shot. And yeah, I can just remember that, and it was a cool thing to be a part of, and I mean cool, like where guys would come over and like, you mind if I borrow that, man, for tonight? And like, yep. And then they'd come back with the chocolate bar as a thank you, and here's your book, and here's a chocolate bar. Thanks for letting me escape this place for a little bit of time, even though it was an hour or whatever it was, for them to power through that book.
Cool. So like that's my brother-in-law tells me all the time because of my business and kind of what I do. He said he thinks that's why I enjoy the comic book genre so much is because it is an escape from my real life. It is a fantasy, like to go out as superheroes and things like that. That's the reason he thinks I dig it so much because if you knew me like every day, like most people are surprised to find out that I am a huge comic book reader. Just in my day to day life, and people that deal with me on the regular are like, "Really, you read comic books?" I'm like, "Yeah, dude, all the time." Like, I literally left the office yesterday. I'd had a crazy week. I had finished up what I had to do about 2:00, and then I had an appointment at 4. So I actually left the office, went to my local comic book shop, and dug around in the back issue bins for a while,
Yep.
and found a Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen #3.
Oh.
Yeah, it's pretty rough shape. It was one of the last books of I think forget exactly what it was, but anyway, I ended up bringing it home with me. It's a beautiful book. It's sitting right over there somewhere in a bag. But that to me, and that's why I asked the question because I wondered. Being in the military, my dad was a military guy.
Yep.
And he would say that you would get bored, that there was downtime was kind of boring. And he said everybody was kind of looking for something to read. That's why he didn't mind like comic books with me. Like my uncle was always into that stuff, and him and my uncle were really close. And I talk about my uncle a lot. I feel bad my dad. My dad was awesome. He was the coolest dude ever.
Yep.
And he really supported me and all of it. He just didn't care. He was like, "Hey, I remember guys in the barracks reading those books just to pass the time because you would get bored." And he said there were more people reading them than you realized. He said you have these big muscle bound tough guys that read comic books all the time, just pass the time. Yep. So cool, man. All right. So question 5: why did Chris start a YouTube channel?
Oh boy. I was pushed towards it. The person in my life pushed me towards it, like, you got to do this. You got, you're a storyteller. You like to talk. People are gonna like what you have to say. Like, you need to do this. And like everyone else who takes that first baby step towards the idea of doing this, it's pretty scary. Like it was unnerving. I don't want to say frightening, but the fear of the unknown, how am I going to come across? Like, how do I do this? How do I present myself? And I just decided in secret one day, I'm going to do this. And I did it. And it was like, not to say that my channel is anything like spectacular, but it was just, my phone towards my whatever I was opening, like, this is what I got today. And eventually I'm like, okay, maybe now I'm going to show my face. And okay, well, why don't I do this inside my car? Because I'm sitting here in the parking lot in front of my LCS. This is what I got today.
So I have a question about that, like legit. So when I first started watching you, pretty much every video you shot was in your car. Every single one. And like, I was like, is this dude literally just walking out of his LCS and hitting record and recording here's what I got today? Like, I thought that was awesome. Was that what you were doing?
Literally, it would be, I'd be walking out of my LCS. I'd be walking away from where I'd be picking up my mail. And if I got something in my mail, I was just that little kid inside of me. I can't wait till I get this home. I got to open this right now. And 9 times out of 10, it would be my car because, like yourself, I'm a busy man when it comes to work. So If I'm not working, I'm somewhere in my car going somewhere or coming from somewhere and dealing with appointments, that kind of stuff. So it was always in my car, to the point where DJ Lynx one time mentioned that, oh, it's the car guy, and that's when it hit me, like, I think I need to start doing it in my home a little bit too. I don't want people to think that I'm homeless and that I live
Yeah,
in
this
my
dude lives
car.
in his car and reads comic books. Awesome. Yeah. No,
But
well, it really did. It struck me as I didn't think that, but it actually struck me as I was like, I think this guy's going in, buying his books, and he's so excited
yeah,
that he's just coming out and recording the video right then to get that fresh, And I thought it was great. Like I really did. It was
yeah.
one of the things that drew me to your channel. I was like, dude, that's
Well,
awesome.
thank you. It was, and the thing is, I really wanted to capture that moment because I would have a lot of things running through my mind. Like if there was a backstory to a particular special book that I was buying that wasn't necessarily New Comic Book Day related. If I got myself a book from a different location, I would want to talk about that book right away and the history of it and how I know it. And if I do have a past with the book, and I would be afraid that the small nuances of the story would be lost if I decided to wait a couple hours or wait 24 hours and try and record it from home. And the one thing that, looking back at some of these videos, uh, it was good for the time, and I still enjoy doing it on Wednesdays. But I just really like the acoustics inside my car,
It sounds
and
good. It really
yeah,
does.
and like I didn't need a mic or anything, and like my phone. Thankfully, it has a good mic on it, so I could record well inside my car. But yeah, when DJ Links pointed out that the fact that I was the car guy, I'm like, I got to get away from that.
Well, I
Yeah,
still like it. I mean, I like to
thank you.
see it. Yeah, as far as that goes, that really it did. It kind of drew me to your channel. All right, so question 6, and I like to start with the negative. Has there been anything negative on your YouTube journey? Like, have you experienced anything negative in the community, or anything about YouTube, or anything like that that you're just like, man, that sucks?
Uh, Thinking that someone knows me when they have no idea who I am, just because I'm so familiar with your channel. Uh, the channel that really drew me into YouTube when I first started was Simpleman's Comics.
Sure.
Brian and Jack, you had Jack on a little while
Mm-hmm.
ago. Great guy, incredibly knowledgeable, and uh, and I really enjoyed their format when they were recording together. I don't know if they record together anymore.
They don't. Yeah.
Yeah, but they were together for a while, especially when COVID started up, and I was watching everything they were doing, and I thought this was just a great format. These guys got it going on, and I remember reaching out to Brian or whatever, and saying something to him, and like trying to relate to him, and it was the response was just like a 1 or 2 word answer, like, dude, like I have no idea who you are. So it wasn't necessarily the dark side of YouTube for me hasn't reared its ugly head. It's just when you're watching this stuff, you develop a relationship with them, you leave comments and that, and it gets liked. And I was in the thought process at the time, like, oh, I watch your stuff, maybe you're watching my stuff too. But man, man, was I wrong. But
Well, like for me, I know what you're saying. Like sometimes I think there are people who will leave comments. Like the worst comment that I've ever really received, I've received some bad ones, but I talk funny, right? I sound funny to a lot of people because of my Southern accent, or what I call my hillbilly accent.
okay,
And I will say things in videos sometimes. I might say a book name incorrectly because people don't understand. It is, I've said it on here before, but it's really weird to sit and talk to yourself in front of a camera.
oh
Um,
yes,
and it is a little unnerving, like, especially when you first get started. I'm pretty comfortable with it now. It doesn't really bother me. I just kind of do it and roll on. Um, but it's really, and so that I thought, man, you don't know me, and you're making fun of me because of the way that I talk. You don't know anything about me, and I think that's a good answer. All right, so let's end these series of questions on the positive. Question 7: what's the positives of this journey?
uh, Brian from Simpleman's Comics knows who I am now.
I bet.
Yeah, it's just watching his, or not to stay on that particular topic of Brian, but he's a cigar connoisseur, much like myself, and he's a former Marine, and so just there's now like I don't want to say there's any kind of like friendship or anything,
But
but
there's a
he know,
connection. You guys
but
have a lot in common.
that there he knows who I am, and I reached out a couple times, and now it's he's a good dude. I would never say nothing bad about him. I thoroughly enjoy his work. The good side of it is developing friendships like
Yeah.
this. It's incredible. I remember when I discovered yourself, Gary, and Jason. You guys called yourselves the usual suspects, and I can remember you saying, and I hope I get the quote right, that you did this for fun, and you developed a serious friendship in Jason and Gary, and you haven't met the men yet, but you can't wait for it, but you would consider them friends. And that term to me, friends, is something pretty wholehearted. It's large. It's not like an acquaintance or a buddy or something. Friends is something that you have for a considerable portion of your life. So when you said that, I thought, my God, I hope I get to that point with where Jimmy can say, he's a part of a trio, that the usual suspects. And I think I think I'm in that vicinity where your quote comes from. That I have a friendship, yes, with I like to think I have a friendship with you and Gary and Jason, and I like to think I have a friendship with Mark from Legion of Comics, Ryan, new guy who now has I believe he changed his YouTube name to the Cosmic Campfire. We do that thing collectively every Sunday. Rob's Fat Stacks of Comics, another great guy out in San Diego. Uh, and I'm sure there's people I'm forgetting, so forgive me. But yeah, the enjoyable part of YouTube is the friendships. Yeah, it'd be cool to sit here and say that you get to show off these great books that you have, and look what I managed to get myself today. But it's the friendships where you create a video and you show a book and you go through your list of comments and you spotlight those ones that mean something to you, like, oh, I'm glad that he enjoyed that, I'm glad that this person digs that. And then through those comments you start to see people, the repeat offenders, you know what I mean? Like, there's a great guy in Minnesota, Dave's Dungeon, I believe is his channel name, and he's always throwing comments on there too, and I hope one day I get to shake his hand too. It's just these friendships. Even though I've never had an opportunity to speak to him face to face like how you are, I know that I can consider this gentleman or these guys friends. And one day when I get to shake their hand, you can solidify that statement.
I know when Gary B and Slot interviewed me for 10 questions, right at the 25th episode, and they
Yeah.
asked me the question, they said, what would you recommend, or what's a tip? And my answer to that was, find your usual suspects,
Yep.
because that has been one of the most. And I say this, I get all sappy about it. I'm a sappy guy. I can't help it.
Me
It's just
too.
who I
Me
am.
too.
So it really did. It filled something in me, because I don't have a ton of friends, Chris. As far as I have my best friend that I've had since I was a kid,
Yep.
little kid. We still hang out right now and talk.
Yep.
We go to Kentucky football games together. My friends are my family, right?
Mm-hmm.
My wife, my two daughters, my mom, my sister, my brother-in-law. My immediate family. Those are my friends. I don't have friends outside of that circle, really. But I was missing it, and I didn't know it, because I've developed this common bond with a bunch of people. And it doesn't matter if you're black, if you're Hispanic, if you speak Spanish, if you can't speak it, whatever, it doesn't matter. Everybody has a common love. We may not agree on everything, like
Oh,
Taylor and I, we agree on nothing politically, like we are the polar opposites. But I love Taylor. I think
mm-hmm.
he's awesome. I don't
Mm-hmm.
care about any of that crap, because he likes comic books and he's funny. You know what I mean? He's just a good dude, man.
Yes,
And
he is.
and so that's the part for me. And I was interested to hear your answer, because I feel that way about you. Like, I can remember when Chris left me a comment, dude. And we joke about it, about the knife, about
The
the little
knife.
tiny knife I use. He said,
Yep.
always watch all these Americans open these boxes and they whip out like these big machetes to open up their boxes. And
It's true.
yeah, and Jimmy's breaking out this little knife, like, here,
Yep.
that's kind of cool. He said, that's how we do it in Canada. And I was like, my Canadian brother right there.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got. Yep. Like. Yep.
Yeah.
We could take this down. An inappropriate avenue if you like, but yes, the size of your knife that you open
Right.
boxes with doesn't mean anything else. But
No, I
yeah,
told Chris, I said, I don't feel the need to compensate for
that's
anything. So I
right.
use this tiny knife. I don't care. And
Yep.
the Canadian brothers are the same way.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. No, I'll never forget that, like that comment, because it made me laugh when I read it. Like I was
Yeah.
like, oh, cool, that's funny. And I knew you were watching my video.
Yep.
And that's one of the things, too, like, I'm going to ask you this kind of a little off topic, but as far as like watching videos, like for me, that's one thing I try to remind people on here. If you're watching, like I watch a ton of videos, a
Yep.
ton,
Mm-hmm.
but it's generally while I'm driving.
Okay.
And because I drive a lot, so I have a playlist I set up for like all your videos go in that playlist, all Mark's
Okay.
videos go in that playlist, all
Yep.
Rob's, all Gary's, all Slots, all DJs, everybody,
Yep.
Remy, all the people that I watch their channels. And I just hit play, and while I'm driving, I listen and watch those videos.
Yep.
And I don't get to comment on all of them.
Yeah.
Like I will go through comment, like I have watched, generally when I comment on your videos, I've literally watched them all once. I'm just
Yeah.
coming back
Yeah, I
so
can
I can
tell.
leave a
Yeah.
comment, and I'm leaving
Yep.
like 20 comments at a time. And Chris is
Yep.
like, God, who's blowing up my YouTube right now?
We have a lot in common, Jimmy. Like I'm doing the same thing. Like what I do is I'll like driving home late at night, or if I'm just in the late hours, I'll power through a particular channel. Like for example, I can remember one evening watching Gary V's stuff, and I think I went through like 6 videos. And for those that don't know me, I like to leave comments as I'm watching. So I'll leave like 3 or 4 comments in one particular video, and I think I blew up Gary's channel with like 15, 20 comments in one night. And then like I don't know if I woke him up or whatever, but then like half an hour later it was like just came in on my phone from Gary, and I kind of felt bad. I'm like, I hope he's a night owl, but but that's what I'll do. Like, yeah, I generally speaking, if I leave one comment on someone's video, it's exactly what you do. I'm watching it, or I'm listening to it away from my normal my normal time, how I would normally sit down and try and get through 5 or 6 videos like before work or after work. But yeah, I can wholeheartedly appreciate what you're saying.
All right, so next question. And I'm interested in you as a longtime collector. And I've been asking this question on most of the 10 questions episodes because everybody gives me a different answer to these next 2 questions. And so I'm kind of just interested to what you think. So, and Slot and I talk about this a lot because Slot and I have become big indie guys. Where I still buy books from the big 2. I got my favorites that I read no matter what. No matter how bad that Spider-Man run sucks, I'm buying the book and reading it every week. Okay, and I like the current Spider-Man run is not good.
No,
it's just not.
no.
But I buy it every week and read
Yes.
it. So the question is this. So you've got the big 2, you got DC and Marvel, and that's where the majority of our superheroes come from. But I hear a lot of talk about people grabbing indie books and reading their indies first, or really kind of going away from DC and Marvel and really gravitating to indies.
Yep.
Why do you think that is?
More freedom and independence. I think there's way more freedom as a writer for an independent comic book than what it is to be, I don't want to say pigeonholed, but through that, that cavern of what one particular superhero can do. If you're a writer and you get to do Batman, well, you got to stay within that canon. You can't necessarily keep doing crossover after crossover in the franchise settle. That's where you see a lot of these well-established writers. I don't want to say break away because you can tell they still have a love for a certain character within the big 2, but you see them venture into the Image, the Boom, and the AWA Upshot, and they're doing these stories that they want. Some of them are still superhero stories. Some of them are outside that type of genre. but they're all incredibly creative, whether you like them or not. It's just outside their wheelhouse. And for those of us that are venturing into the independent avenue and going down those roads, it's almost refreshing because now you're being introduces something that hasn't been there, during the 80s and the 90s outside of when Image first got launched, but that was still in the same type of wheelhouse where most of the Image stuff that first got created was still superhero genre. So the stuff that I'm really enjoying when it comes to the independent lane isn't necessarily superhero books. It's, the more macabre, the horror, just the bright sky type of independent that Marvel or DC wouldn't necessarily release under their own banner, that maybe would be released under a sub banner that doesn't frequently get explored that much anymore.
Cool. So, that's something that's a great point. Like Scott Snyder wrote, the last Batman run,
Yep.
Or Justice League. He was on Justice League,
Yep.
and he wrote New 52 Batman,
Yep.
which is a classic run.
Yep.
And one of my favorites, though, right now, two books, he's writing Undiscovered Country and Noctera.
Noctera. Yep.
Noctera's unreal. It's like so
Yep.
good.
Yep. I love when writers are going outside the normal just white 20s or teenage type of male as their lead protagonist. I like when they're doing it different. That's why my favorite comic book right now is Something is Killing the Children. We have a
Oh, so good.
non-sexualized woman as the lead character. Noctera, again, another great female protagonist lead. The independents, like, they're just doing whatever they want, and their editors there just give them this freedom that's thoroughly being refreshing. And it's cool that a lot of these books you can spec on too, but the story itself is even bigger than what the spec ever could be, even if that becomes a 3 or 4 digit book, down the road. Like, look what The Walking Dead did, 15 years ago.
Yep.
And who would have thought a zombie comic book would be something in the forefront of a pulp culture type of media? So that's the independents. Like, they're kicking some serious ass lately. So good for Boom, good for Image, good for AWA Shot, good for Scout Comics. These guys are they're trailblazing. It might be challenging up against the big two, but they're getting all the writers from the big two. Even though the big writers are still delivering great stories as a whole with the big two, it's just nice to see something outside of the normal wheelhouse that we've been reading our entire lives.
Great answer. No, and I agree, because I think with the independence, you're right, and I think that's it. I think that is the crux of it. Is there is a history, a 40, 50, 60, 70 year canon that a lot of these writers have to stay within when they're writing these books. I think that's why there's 500 Batman books, is because people want to tell other stories about Batman. You just can't do it within the continuity of the current run, and you don't have a ton of freedom to expand outside of that, because you don't want to ruin the brand, right? You can't make Superman something different than Superman is. You can't make Batman different than he is. It's not something you can really do. You'd upset a bunch of people who are traditionalists, I guess. And so, the independent run, because like Something That's Killing the Children, you're right, it is phenomenal. Like, I love it. And I also love like Chip Zdarsky on Stillwater. I really like Stillwater. I'm like you. I kind of like the macabre, and I'm not a horror guy. Like, I don't seek out horror movies.
Right.
But I really dig like horror comic books. Like, I think they're really good. There's just something different about them I like.
Mm-hmm. I still find there's still a shock value with a lot of these horror comic books. I don't mean shock value as in, oh my god, I can't look at this kind of thing. It's just like, oh my god, this is incredible. My god, I never thought that there'd be monsters that only children and teenagers can see, and when they see them, it's not a good thing. It's not a good experience. And to see what happens to these children, that that Something That's Killing the Children, it's fascinating to be a reader for. Not to keep repeating myself on stuff like that, but it's these type of books didn't necessarily exist, or they were more underground in the 80s and 90s when I was first introduced to the more mature type of reading when it comes to comic books in this particular medium.
Cool. All right, question 9. And I wanted to ask you this question because you've collected for so long, right? It seems
Yeah.
like you really have just been into it, since a kid all the way through now. It's never really stopped for you. Even in the military, you were reading, doing those things. So, how has comic book collecting changed over the years? Like, what have you seen? I know that's kind of a deep question, but as far as like for you, your experience, like the question I generally ask Chris is like, what's the biggest challenge to the comic book community today? But where you've collected pretty much your whole life, and even Mark too, like when I was talking to him, and I wanted to ask him that question and I didn't, so that's why I'm asking you, is like, how's it changed? Like, has it changed for you in the way that you collect, the way that you buy?
Money comes to mind.
Sure.
It's you're starting to get some of these prestige format comic books. You're paying $8 or $9 or $10 for one particular issue, and that's the part that I find the biggest change with. Obviously, with the current bubble that we're going in right now, with the spec market and classic Silver Age, Golden Age, Copper Age books, they're all going through the roof. The biggest change I'm seeing is non-comic book fans getting into the medium right now, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. If they're being introduced to films and this is how they're coming into it, a lot of people would say, "Oh, they're only in it for the money or whatever." I kind of think I'm more of a glasses half full kind of guy. I'm kind of thinking that they want to educate themselves on particular characters that they're enjoying in the films or whatever. Like not everyone can say they're a Doctor Strange fan, but it's through his movie, which is arguably one of the better MCU movies that were ever made. And we can see how important that particular character is to any type of crossover movie. You need Doctor Strange and Marvel, or it's just not going to work. Um, you see the Doctor Strange back catalog starting to become a little bit more popular, and so it's those kind of things that I notice, that I see the change where people who are new to it, they're educating themselves. The omnibuses are starting to become popular again, not just for its collectability but for its readability. And but yeah, hands down, the biggest change is money. Just I can remember in the 80s and 90s, Giant Size X-Men would be a $50 wall book. Now it's a $15,000 wall book if you can find a super high grade. And that part is, the disheartening part of it, where the common man can no longer reach out and try and get those books. Like, I don't know about you, but I can't spend the amount of money I would spend on a brand new car that I would spend
Right.
on one particular issue.
Yeah, it's a
You know,
difficult
like
thing to pull the trigger on. It really is.
like do I make a mortgage payment, or do I go get that Amazing Spider-Man, 21?
Right. Well,
Like,
no, no, it's a valid question though, because really, like,
yeah,
so let's just kind of bounce off this question and talk
sure.
about this. Like, I think that the bubble, I think there is a bubble,
Hmm.
but I think that there will be some sustained growth in some of the prices. I don't think that you're going to see. I think the bubble is with the new stuff, like the modern books, like Nottingham comes to mind. That book is a $50 book right now, and I just don't see that holding. I think in a year you'll be able to buy that book for cover or just above cover, maybe $10. It may be one of those books. Um, what do you think about the book? Like, I think that the bubble is almost over. I think there's been so much free money given out. And I say that lightly, free, where everybody's going to pay that back here in America
Yeah.
through our tax dollars. I think for every $1,400 you got to pay 22 grand back. This is not a political show, but I want to throw that in there. But
It's
anyway,
here too.
they call it this free money, and so I think there's been so much of that flowing around that people are bored because of COVID, right? So I think it's created this market, this overinflated market, and I think you're going to have a correction. I think it's going to kick back, but I think the blue chip books, like the older books, Silver Age, Bronze Age, think books like that, I think you're going to see a value. I think they'll come back some, but I still think where they were at before the bubble will be higher. What do you
Oh,
think?
absolutely agree. Now, when the bubble eventually dissolves, I don't want to say when the bubble bursts because I hope it doesn't burst. But when it eventually dissolves, I think the blue chip books and that, the copper, the silver, the golden, people won't be so hard lined on prices. There'll be some negotiating then. Like Yeah, the entry level Hulk 181, you'll be able to haggle a little bit, as opposed to, nope, this is what it's going for on eBay. There's no way you're getting it for less for the last sale. That's just occurred on eBay. When cons start to fire back up, and shops get to travel, and people are moving all around the countries, and they're getting to see different books, different places, and you had that more personal freedom to do what you want safely. Uh, I think books are going to be a little bit more affordable. But I don't mean necessarily that they're going to drop in value. I just think people are going to be more open to negotiating, because right now the face-to-face negotiating is a rare thing
Yeah.
outside of your own city. You can do it online, you can do this, but it's a lot easier to say no to someone over, online, as opposed to listen to what they're going through to try and get the book from you that you want to sell them. But to answer your original question, the biggest change I've seen is the complexity of storytelling now, where you would have single issue formats in the 80s and 90s. A Spider-Man book would have a beginning and an ending in one particular issue, or perhaps it would go over 3 issues. Now it's just an ongoing arc. You may get 6, 10, 15 issues where it would be one contained arc. That's probably the biggest difference that I've noticed in comic books. What comes to mind is the Death of Kraven series, or the Death of Kraven story that happened over 3 different Spider-Man titles in the span of just 2 months. The Amazing Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man, and Web of Spider-Man. Each issue got 2 parts in this particular series, and I can remember when that came out that it was mind-blowing. Now, we did have Secret Wars and Crisis on Infinite Earths at the time, but they were their own book, and they lasted 12 issues in their own series. We did have books that tied into those particular crossover events, but what happened with the Death of Kraven was something that I found personally monumental, and it was such a great story, and it was beautifully drawn. Mike Zeck did great work with that particular short run, and when that series happened over the 3 titles, it opened my mind to, this is what we need to be doing with books in general. And then that's when I discovered, like, books like Daredevil had those type of arcs going over a season, like 4 or 5 issues. And the Uncanny X-Men would have these type of arcs as well. And once I graduated into those type of books, and then into Batman on the DC side of things, that's when I realized there's much better writing going on than the particular books that I've been pigeonholing myself to. And now that we're into the last 10 years of these incredible writers that we're fortunate enough to get, that's the one thing that I've noticed. These books that were books that I enjoyed as a child, even though these titles are still going on today, they're not books for children necessarily
Sure.
anymore. Yeah,
No. Awesome. All right, man. Question 10. And this is a softball. It's just something I'm kind of interested to know.
sure.
What's the book you're chasing right now? What's the grail you're chasing right now?
The grail that I could get, or the grail that I will
Yeah,
never get.
something that's attainable. Well, both. Look, tell me
Okay.
both. Like, what the 2 books? What's the book that's obtainable that you're actually trying to find right now, and then the book that you may never have but you would love to have?
I would love to have Amazing Fantasy 15. I am a Spider-Man fan to the end, and
Nice.
I've had some high-grade copies in my hand. I've even taken dealers that let me take pictures with high-grade copies of Amazing Fantasy 15. It's just not there anymore. Maybe if I sell the property I'm in and I make good money off of it, and
Right.
I'll and I can get into something that's still the same type of same type of home that I'm living in, and I can have $30,000 or $40,000 to put down on perhaps an entry level AF-15. Maybe then I'll get it. But right now I'm working on Amazing Spider-Man issue 1 to 100, and I've really cranked out a lot of them. Right now, the big ones I'm missing are probably issue 2 and issue 3. Now, I do have a U.S. postal mailbox on the other side of the border in Buffalo, New York, and I have stuff sitting there. It's been sitting there for a year because, as you know, the U.S. Canadian border has been closed ever since COVID happened, and I have these books sitting there. And I know a lot of people are going to poke fun at me, but I can't remember if I have issue 2 or issue 3 sitting there at my mailbox. I have one of the two. So to answer your question, Amazing Spider-Man issue 2 and or issue 3 is my personal grail right now, along with Hulk 182, so I can complete that trinity of the first appearance of Wolverine. I do have a 180. I do have an entry level 181, and I would love to get my hands on a 182 in a fair grade. Just to say that, I have arguably the most famous Canadian superhero, the trinity of his first appearance.
That's awesome, man. Those are great books. Like I always tell, it's funny that you said that about AF-15 because,
Yeah,
like for me, the Grail
Action
is
Comics
Action
1.
Comics. That's the Grail, right?
Right.
I'm gonna have to. And I've told Amy this. Like I'm not joking when I say this. Like I mean this 100%. When the day comes that I sell my business, I am buying an Action Comics #1.
Yes, sir.
I will probably
God
have to
bless you for it.
I will probably have to resell it a week later,
But it will be in your home.
but I will own it at
Yes.
some time. Now, like I said, I may have to resell it immediately, but I will own one of these days. Like I will own that book, and like I said, I'll probably have to get rid of it, but immediately. But it will be mine. Oh yes, it will be mine.
And I often say, if I hit the lottery here and I hit more than 2 or 3 million, I sure will own an Action Comics 1 too.
No, man, I'm telling you,
Because
yeah,
let's be honest, without Superman, none of this happens. None of this happens.
Yeah,
I'm sure somewhere along the line in some other alternate universe, other alternate dimension, not to get all childish, whatever. But let's be honest, without Siegel and Schuster creating Superman in Action Comics #1, you and I may not be having this conversation today.
Yeah, that's absolute the truth. And that's a great place to end this 10 Questions interview. Guys, we appreciate you joining us. And I appreciate Chris coming on. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And it's why I asked him to come on. I knew it would be good. So the one thing that I always say at the end of this, guys, is to remember the code STC10. You can go over Street Level Hero LA and use that code STC10. You'll get 10% off your order. But Street Level Hero will donate 25% of the overall order to the American Cancer Society for Cancer Research, and that's very, very important to me. Very, big cause. My dad, my uncle, and my mother-in-law all passed in the past 10 to 12 years from cancer. And when we started, it was supposed to be for a limited time, Chris. And we just keep extending it because we're raising some money and we're starting to raise some real money. So if you're watching this, definitely go out there to Street Level Hero. They got all kinds of cool books over there. Go over there, pick something up, pick up a cool shirt. They've got a shirt with the Metallica, the S and the A at the end of it. That look. So definitely go check it out. I would appreciate it. And go join the comic army. It is... like I swear, Chris, and I'm not just saying this, dude, because you're on here. Your channel's good, man, and the knowledge that you show, and that you show on some of these other channels that you are on, is really solid, man. And so I look to you at times and Mark for knowledge about books, things I'm thinking about, a discussion. So if you're watching this, I'll have all Chris and the Comic Vet stuff here in the description below. Go sub this cat up. You will not regret it. Be part of the comic army. I love that too, by the way, the comic army. It's so much better than be a townie. Like I want people to be townies, or Townie Nation. We could like Big Blue Nation for the cats. Townie Nation. We can come up with something. But the comic army is ready made, and that's beautiful. So go join the comic army. Go over, sub Chris up. Like I said, you will not be. You just can't go wrong. A lot of good stuff on that channel, a lot of good knowledge. And guys, what else can I say? Chris, the Comic Vet. And as I always end these things, until next time.